Welcome. I see by our participants, there are 15 of us on now, and I just scrolled through, seeing in some cases, your wonderful faces, in some cases, a nice backdrop. And I see some familiar faces and some names I'm not familiar with. So those of you who don't know me, I'm Nancy Farnan, president of the SDSU Retirement Association. And we are very excited to be working with Ron and his team and offering some really useful information and support and help for the members of our retirement association. So I wanted to welcome you also to say, if you haven't responded yet, we have a Valentine's Day event coming up at the Valley High. If you haven't attended before, it's a wonderful event in a beautiful location. I know Ron's going to be there, and I know several of you on this seminar are going to be there. This is the first of many, actually, that we're planning to have. You did receive an email about those upcoming tentative dates, but we're going to shoot for those dates as closely as we can, and we will definitely keep you apprised as we schedule them. And we're also hoping, actually planning, to visit some retirement communities, which are really beautiful campuses. And I hear tell that the people who attend those get treated to a lovely lunch as well as a tour. So I haven't done that before, and I definitely look forward to it. And I hope some of you will do that too. We will plan to do more than one. So I think this is just a very exciting thing for our community. One more thing I want to say is we are recording this. So if you know people who haven't or who aren't able to be here, or you want to just go back and look at it, our plan is to create a link to, this is aspirational, but I think it's going to happen, a YouTube channel that you can watch these seminars after they've occurred. And so again, if people can't be here, it'll be for them, but also for you if you want to go back and listen again. So obviously I can talk a while, but I don't want to take up all our time. So I want to introduce Ron Greenwald, and I'll let him introduce himself and his team, and we'll get started.
Well, thank you, Nancy. This is a real honor for me to do this, and everybody's going to be able to introduce themselves, and we have an amazing panel to bring you information. Amy Abrams and Adam Sherry are on the part of the panel. Amy and I go back about 15 years on having this exact discussion with people over those 15 years, and you'll learn a lot about Amy's background and what she brings to the table. Adam Sherry is one of the leading estate planning attorneys in San Diego. And again, the three of us have more stories than we could ever possibly share with you. So the idea of rocking into and through retirement is to be very honest and very candid and very forthright with you as to the reality of aging. We all prefer to age, and it's going to happen. And the idea of this today is to allow you to meet us, to introduce yourself to you, you introduce yourself to us, and get into what is important to you to understand as you age. Aging in place, aging in communities, incapacity, everything that goes on with the aging process. We'll be very forthright with you and talk to you as to what we feel and what we know to be reality. So my name is Ron Greenwald. I have been doing these presentations for other universities over the past 10 to 12 years, for other nonprofit organizations, where we come in and we tell you facts that you may not always want to hear, but we want you to understand that you do have choices. And by doing nothing, you're making a choice that may not be so favorable to long-term positive outcome in terms of your quality of life. So again, Ron Greenwald, and who am I? I have an MBA from I actually got my undergraduate in accounting from the what was it, Cal State University Northridge. And we were just talking about that last night. I paid $99 for a full 12 units at Cal State Northridge back in the 70s. So just there, I worked for the company called Arthur Anderson back after that, and then got a master's degree in finance from the University of Southern California. Back in the 90s, I got into the mortgage industry, and then 2008 came along, and I transitioned into real estate with a focus on working with older adults. And actually, one of my incredible stories is Amy. Amy was one of the first people that I got to know real well back in those days, or 12, 15 years ago, and was one of my mentors in sharing with me really the enormity of the impact of the aging population. And so for the last 15 or so, since 2008, 2009, I have focused on not just the real estate perspective of aging and aging in place and moving to senior communities and all that goes with that journey, but really being an advocate on your behalf. Because we do know that about 95% of the population wants to age in place. But we do know that the idea of the possible fall or a possible injury may limit your ability to age in place. So what can we do? Part of this journey, part of these seminars, part of these workshops are going to be a reality check on what you can do to age in place successfully. And also understanding that at some point in time, there may be incapacity. And are you prepared for incapacity? Are you prepared for your spouse's incapacity? Are you prepared to have a caregiver come and live with you or be in your home? Are you prepared to have a daughter or son come live with you to be a caregiver? Are you prepared for the family dynamics that comes with a role reversal of when a child becomes a parent as you age? Are you aware of your family dynamics in terms of estate planning and the burden that you may be putting on your family to be a successor trustee? All of these topics are going to be something that we are going to talk about and be very honest with you about, and really hope to enlighten you to that. I always say, I try to keep it clean. Poop happens. And it's going to happen over the last 1/3 of our lives. There's going to be times where you're going to need assistance. You're going to need to accept assistance to understand that that's really going to keep you independent as you try to age in place. And also the idea, as Nancy said, the idea of going to senior communities is nothing more than to understand the alternatives if and when you think the time may be appropriate for you. So we really want you to, just like if back in, we talked about the 70s, this music of the 60s and the 70s before we went on to this Zoom, it's just like when you were back in your 20s and 30s and you went out to look at new homes that were built by Pardee or Baldwin or KB Homes, and you went on tours of the new communities in town, and you got to see all the latest and greatest in design and model homes. It's the same concept that we want to provide for you over the next 12 months of going out to various senior communities and understanding what they have to offer. They will present themselves as cruise ships and dry dock, and many of them are, and they have amazing amenities. Is it the right move for you? Is it the appropriate move for you? And does it eliminate the idea of isolation, of living alone? Does it eliminate having socialization and having activities, having meals prepared? Is that a better, higher quality of life for you rather than living in your home? That's a question. So we want you to be aware of it, and we want you to understand what's out there. So that is a little bit about Ron Greenwald. And again, we're going to introduce Amy and introduce Adam to introduce themselves and tell us a little their background. And then we're going to want to really open it up to you and understand what you're looking for. This first workshop in January is all about hearing what your needs and wants are for those that are participating. We will not get into specific financial questions of, can you afford X, Y, or Z? That's a very personal thing. More of a broad brush approach to this and give you that kind of background. And then obviously offline, we can be more specific with you, and Amy and Adam are available for that. Basically, kind of, Amy, you want to kind of work through me on that one, just to, but anyway. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Amy and let her introduce herself. And again, I have to preface it, Amy. Amy is somebody who has, and she will tell you her background, but you really, really want to know Amy. She has the most, she's just a fabulous, besides being a presenter, a fabulous background, and one of the most caring people in this space that I've ever met. And she's been really important to me to get to where I am today, to feel comfortable, to be very honest and open with people, to say, no, not a good idea to name your 3 children as co-trustees or things like that. So Amy, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you so much, Ron. Can everyone see me, hear me? Okay, great. It's really been a pleasure working alongside Ron all these years, and I appreciate those comments very much. So I'll just spend a few minutes here giving everyone my background, basically so that you have a sense of what types of issues you might want to hear more about, what types of questions you can direct my way. So I just want to sort of explain why I'm going into some of the detail that I am. So I have worked in the space of aging, geriatric, dementia care, and now the field of community health more broadly since about the year 2000. I am a proud SDSU alum. I did my undergraduate studies at UC San Diego, and then made the leap over to SDSU for my master's degree. So I did a joint Master of Social Work and Master of Public Health there. While I was there, I did clinical and administrative internships with Kaiser as a case manager, and then in a private geriatric care management company. I'll tell you more about care management. It's going to be kind of a key concept here as we go along. So I finished my coursework at SDSU in 2001, went into the field of professional geriatric care management. We don't call it geriatric care management anymore, but that's what it was called in the early 2000s when I entered the field. Today, you might know these professionals as aging life care professionals. So what I did as a private care manager was that I worked individually with families. Families hire individuals or families, or sometimes professionals, hire care managers to be like a private advocate, someone who comes into the home, wherever home is. We can work in any kind of setting, sits down and has really in-depth conversations with the client, with the circle of people that surround that client. Sometimes they're legal representatives or decision makers, people who have power of attorney, informal authority as well. So to try to get the whole picture of who this person is, how they have lived, of course, what resources are available to them so that we can put together a realistic care plan, but set some goals together. Is it your hope to stay at home for as long as possible? Are you open to relocating? And if so, do you want to stay here in San Diego County? Are you looking to move somewhere to be closer to children, for example? What are your thoughts on end-of-life care? What are your thoughts on heroic measures, right? As we used to call them, life-sustaining treatment. So I would sit down and just really get into the weeds with people about the circumstances, the realities of their life, and guide them through thinking through kind of all the things we tend to think of as pretty negative. So I started doing this work when I was really young. I was in my late 20s when I started doing that work. And as you might imagine, I became a person who was real fun at cocktail parties because I would, corner people and ask them about their advanced healthcare directives and, want to hear their thoughts on end of life and dying. And this really became something I'm very, very comfortable talking about, my own planning, my own feelings and thoughts and opinions about these things. But I also really love guiding people through kind of opening up some of those thoughts for themselves as well. So I did that work as a professional care manager for close to 15 years. I started my own business in 2004. And we not only provided care management services, we provided consultation for people who were making a placement decision. So making decisions about moving into independent living, assisted living, skilled nursing, memory care, for example. We also operated a home care sort of arm of the business. So I helped people who wanted to stay home with in-home care. So that is to say, I have a range of experience from home care to adult day programs to facilities to skilled nursing facilities, and then a little bit of kind of medical social work background as well. So that's kind of the background. In 2015, I sold my business and moved to work in a local nonprofit called Alzheimer's San Diego. I was a director in that nonprofit where I oversaw the community education piece. So in my years as a care manager, I'd become kind of a de facto expert in dementia because almost every client I worked with, their life was impacted by memory loss or a formal diagnosis of dementia of some kind. This is one of the main reasons people will become incapacitated over time, something we can explore if you're interested in learning more about that. And it's something that even if it's not touching your life directly, many of us will care for somebody who is living with some form of dementia at some point. So I worked in the education program there for about 7-8 years. Recently, I took a new position with the Greenwald Healthcare District. So being retirees of SDSU, many of you probably live within the boundaries of the Greenwald Healthcare District. We're a public agency that serves the people, the taxpayers of East County, throughout East County in San Diego. So anywhere from La Mesa to Campo. If you live there, work there, get your health care there, our programming, our services are available to support you. So we operate, we run a lot of health and wellness programs. We own the hospital. The Sharp Grossmont Hospital is owned by the people of East County, and Sharp operates it. And then we also operate a free health and wellness library, a public library that is all health and wellness resources, information, and programming, free and open to anybody, again, who lives or works within our district boundaries. So something that's probably relevant to many of you. So that's my background, just so you have a sense of who I am from an education and professional standpoint and what I've done, and maybe that brings up some things in your mind that you might want to learn more about through this series. So I look forward to hearing from you and hearing about what you want to learn more about. And I'll just say on a personal note, I've been working in this field since I was very young. When I first started, people would look at me and say, what on earth could you possibly know about aging? And, interestingly, nobody says that to me anymore. They seem to be fine with that as my hair has gotten grayer. But I have really loved this work, connecting with people around issues related to aging. I'm very pro-aging. I will not buy something if it has the word anti-aging on the label. I really believe in the concept of successful aging, but I don't think it has anything to do with, keeping your skin smooth and eating acai berries, or, you know, in my experience, the people who have successfully aged, it had nothing to do with, you know, eating Brazil nuts or anything. It was about how well did you think ahead? How well did you plan ahead? How honest were you willing to be about the realities of growing older and potentially becoming disabled, living with chronic conditions, and really looking around at your living environment and your social support system, and of course your financial resources, and doing the legal planning that you need to do. That's what makes for successful aging. So I'm sort of famous, at least in Ron's world, in a few circles, for my colorful stories of my own, my father. My father, Don, is a true off the grid Colorado mountain man, closing in on 80 years old now. He was much younger when I started telling these stories, but he's still at it. He lives by himself in truly the middle of nowhere, Colorado, a town that has no name. You use coordinates to get to my dad's house. There is no address. Generates his own power, wells his own water, you know, the whole thing. He's lived that way my whole life, literally my whole life. His decision to live that way was the reason my parents divorced. So he's been out there doing that thing for, you know, close to 50 years now. And my dad, when he was closing in on 70, pulled all of the kids together. None of us live out there. We're all in California. Pulled us all together. We were on we were planning a camping trip in Julian here in East San Diego County, and he said, I want to have a conversation about what's going to happen when I get old. What we're going to do with my things. This was my dad's version of estate planning, right? My dad has, you know, nothing. at least what most of us would consider an estate. This is not what you think of. You know, he lives in a homesteaded little shed and has a bunch of, you know, equipment. I don't know what any of it is. I guess he does now probably have a bank account, but he didn't most of my life. You know, just a very odd character. But he wanted to have a conversation about what's going to happen when I go. You kids you don't know what any of this farm junk is. You're not going to know what to do with it, where it should go. You know, who wants, you know, my guitars, he makes all kinds of weird art. Who wants these things, or does nobody want it? Let's sit down and have a conversation about it. I was so impressed. I was so impressed that my dad had initiated this conversation. We gathered at this little campsite in Julian, had the conversation. I brought some advanced healthcare directive sort of template forms and opened up the conversation. I said, Dad, tell me what makes a good day for you. That's my favorite starting question in trying to get to know what's important to someone. And he said, well, you know, if the sun's out, because it's not always out where he is, if the sun's out, I want to sit in the sun, get a little sun on my face, have a hot cup of coffee, and I'm good. The rest of the day is good. That was how we opened up the conversation. And I thought, well, that's easy enough, right? If we're his caregiver someday, we can do that. It's really good to know what's important to him. None of us have ever lived with him. We don't know those little details. What's his favorite coffee cup? And, you know, being somebody that lives in Colorado, I wouldn't have expected sunshine to be top of his list, but it was. Then we really dove in. Where do you want it? How do you want this to go? We found out he was willing to, if he's not able to care for himself, he's willing to move to California to live with one of us. None of us would have ever guessed that he'd be willing to live with one of his kids. We talked about the stuff, you know, that what's junk and what's real and what might be worth something and where should it go. We got that all down on paper. We'll know what to do when the time comes. So over the years, this was a long time ago now, over the years, this has become something of a family tradition. And we call it what do we do with Dad Weekend? WDWDWDW is the family acronym for this. And my dad came up with that, not me. But we revisit it, you know, every year, every summer around his birthday. We sit down and we have a conversation together. Has anything changed? Has your perspective changed? You know, my siblings have moved since then. Would you be willing to live in Washington with my sister, or do you want to stay in California with one of us? So we revisit those things. This is my weird dad's version of estate planning, and it works for him. And it's really we've learned a lot about this person who's been, you know, kind of mysterious most of our lives. So I really appreciate that. So I like to share that story because it sort of shows that estate planning is not just for the wealthy. It's also not even, you know, for people with bank accounts and running water. It's for everyone. In the years that have passed, that I've known Ron and been doing this work and talking with people, I've also lost both of my in-laws, who are, you know, were functioning members of civilization. They had estate plans, they had homes, and my father-in-law died fairly recently from the consequences of a tragic fall in his home. I've always been a big advocate for home safety and fall prevention. I've now lived through the consequences of one of these falls that I've talked with people about for years and years, trying to avoid. So I'm here to tell you, you can have a geriatric care manager or social worker for a daughter or a daughter-in-law, and they still never took my advice in that home. So I'm living it, I'm breathing it, I care about it deeply. I want to help any of you who have questions about how to plan for your own successful aging, whatever that might look like. I'm really honored to be a part of this series, and thank you, Nancy, for organizing it, and thank you, Ron, for inviting me, and I will turn it over to Adam.
Thanks. I look forward to hearing about Dawn too. That's amazing. I've never heard about Dawn, so I look forward to that. And so before I introduce myself, Amy just went over an amazing rundown of all the different ways in which she's approached this topic and how she's gained expertise. And Ron doesn't need this from me, but Ron identified that a large part of his job is working as a realtor. But I gotta say, this really is something that Ron has committed himself to. I do not go to a continuing legal education focused on this area of law without bumping into Ron. And I'm never surprised when it turns out that Ron is the one who actually organized the presenters, organized the speakers, came up with the curriculum. And he really has dedicated himself to this area of our lives, of all of our lives. And, you know, Ron doesn't need me to vouch for him, but it's really easy to think of somebody just based on what their, you know, professional title might be, and we would miss out on that. And so it's been consistent. It's been consistent for as long as I've been practicing in San Diego. So
Well,
that's that. Yep, absolutely. Quickly about myself, I am happy to say I was raised in East County. Both of my parents graduated from SDSU. They met there and actually got married while they were there. So thanks to that chance meeting, I get to join all of you today, which you know, I really appreciate being alive. So that's my connection to SDSU. I went to university in San Diego as well, left to go to law school, worked for a couple years in the Central Valley as an attorney. And then as soon as my spouse, Marley, broached the conversation of maybe we should move back to San Diego, I immediately started planning and had found a great job, relocated. It was a matter of something like 6 months. And so I really love the community here. I love living in San Diego. Feels like home because it is home, and that's something I like a lot about it. So I am a trust and estates attorney, and that is all I do every day, all day. When I was in law school, actually, I knew that it's what I wanted to do, kind of based on a hunch. My hope was that by going into this practice area, I would get to work with people who were like the people I grew up with, right? So normal people, actual humans. They're not abstract legal entities, or it's not some archaic precedent or something like that. I get to work with people's real life issues on a daily basis. And my goal also in working in a smaller office and having my own practice, so it's me and one other attorney, and we have, so it's, my attorney is She is 78. She works 7 days a week, works out 7 days a week. I work 5. I'm happy when I can work out 3 days a week. And so I've been able to establish a dynamic there with somebody who has really helped to kind of round out my professional experience. So I've been doing this for 13 years, and as I mentioned, and so my hope was that by pursuing this area of law, I would get to have direct contact with my clients, that we would get to do things that tangibly made their lives better, and that's not always the case for attorneys. I get lucky in that people we work on things that they've been concerned about, and it's forward looking, and we're able to implement it. And so that's the planning part of my job. And so in that context, we do the stuff that you think of, right? We prepare wills, we prepare trusts, advanced healthcare directives. And so what we're able to do is identify what my client's primary concerns are. And then, how can we effectuate those goals by using the existing law, commonly used documents, and then also just talking about a lot of the informal stuff, right? Amy pointed out that an estate plan can take all different forms, and I 100% agree with that, right? I love DIY. I grew up in El Cajon. My parents were great. They're really awesome. And of course, thrift was a virtue as a Boy Scout growing up. And so DIY planning is great. I'm always willing to talk about DIY planning, even though I do this as an attorney and people pay me to do some of the stuff that can otherwise done via DIY planning. So I love that conversation. I'm always open to it. So that's the forward-looking part. So I do 3 different areas associated with estate planning. So planning is the forward-looking part. And of course, sometimes I'm working with people who just had their first child, and that's the kick in the booty that they need to kind of get some stuff down. Other people just bought a house and they learned about probate and the fact that they might be subject to some kind of onerous legal fees to transfer it if they don't use a particular legal instrument. And then some people, and these are my favorite people because I love that they got it done. Some people are preparing to retire, and they are in their late 60s, mid 70s, late 70s, and they don't have an estate plan. And so having a conversation with a financial advisor or dealing with their employer about having to make decisions regarding their retirement account ended in a recognition that, oh yeah, we need to implement some things on the legal end. So that's the planning part of my job, and I love it. And today we aren't necessarily going to be able to go into the what if hypotheticals, but I know that we will have the opportunity to do that during this program, and I like that, right? And so, and whenever possible, so long as it is advantageous to a majority or a significant number of the people who are on our Zoom gathering, we'll answer those when we can. If it's hyper specific and it turns out you're going to be the only person who's going to benefit from it, we might table it and make a way to connect otherwise through an email or a call or something. But that is one of the things that we look forward to directly addressing during this course. The other 2 areas that I practice are post-death administration. And so post-death administration relates to what happens. So yeah, so it's actually administration. It's not always post-death. So after somebody passes away or after somebody legally loses capacity, there's a variety of different things that are triggered. And so I help people, sometimes it's the individual who established the plan. Sometimes it's the persons that they nominated to execute their plan after they lose capacity or pass away. That's the other half of my work. So I work with people at that point to clean things up. It's in some ways my favorite part of the life cycle, because what I'm able to do is carry out the wishes that I worked with somebody to create when they established their plan. And so the carrying out the wishes was great. That was the prep. And then during the administration period, we really get to apply what we put in place. And that makes me feel good because that's not hypothetical. It's very tangible. And we're carrying out the mission that I suggested to a particular person that we would be able to do by preparing these documents. And so I look forward to being able to answer questions or speak in the context of specific laws specific legal documents that we can use. Also, Ron pointed out that if you don't have a plan, you end up having a plan. It just turns out it's the default. It's the state default. So California has a whole body of law that's meant to kick in when somebody doesn't make a plan. And so we should always be thinking about that, right? Because not having a plan in many ways is having a plan. It just turns out that you're wholesale adopting the default California approach. And I got to say, I don't want to be cynical or excessively negative or something about that. It's actually really logical. So sometimes I get to answer questions for people and they say like, oh gosh, if I don't have something in place, is the government going to take my estate? It's absolutely not going to, right? So there are defaults in place that align in many circumstances with what we might like. But then if we want to go from like acceptable to good to great or excellent or something like that, we can talk about how taking particular steps can allow you to adjust what is otherwise a default application to represent something that you want specifically, because that's the other thing about it. There's so much flexibility in this area that by taking advanced measures, thinking ahead, whether it's thinking about your housing, aging in place, or the legal aspect of it, the goal really is to cater so that you can continue to live life in the way that you want to live it, right? I mean, we take so many different steps and we put in so much energy into, setting up our home the way we like it, right? Choosing media or friends that, cater specifically to us. We're going to lose the ability to supervise that aspect of our life at some point. We will all lose that at some point. So with some advanced planning, we are able to focus on maintaining those particular parts of life that are so important to us, whether it is having a cup of coffee and spending time in the sun, right? Or whether it's making sure that you're able to, live in a particular geographic region. Or I love my kids; they're so helpful to me. I do not ever want to take instructions from them regarding finances, right? Because that's going to shift part of our dynamic. Or I love my kids; I trained them so well regarding finances that if it's time for me to pass the baton to them and they need to start managing my checkbook, my finances, I'm ready for that and I'm good with that. Right? There's no right answer so long as we are asking the questions, exploring what your answer is, and then taking required steps when it's necessary. Finally, I just want to say I love these programs. So they are worth my time to participate in. I'm glad that you're participating in them. This is a really complex topic generally, and it is super broad. And so by approaching a topic like this with your input, with your questions, with you telling us what you want to focus on, and being able to travel along with people like Ron, Amy, myself, you guys sharing what you've learned, right? We are able to kind of break down something that is just overwhelming, intimidating, unpleasant. I mean, Amy, I'm not surprised that bringing up your favorite conversation topic at parties doesn't lead to raucous laughter or people just gathering around saying, let's talk about this, because they, generally don't want to. I had my mom in my office, actually in my office, because that's where I felt most comfortable talking about these things. And I had my mom there, and we have a great relationship. We're super comfortable with each other. And yet, and I know her very well. She knows me. And so I thought I was steering the conversation in a way that would be calm, easy to digest, et cetera. And I was registering in her face, this is really difficult, right? In spite of me having a good understanding of my client in that context, I'm not sending her a bill. She's done plenty for me, right? But the person that I was working for in that context, I know her. And still, I didn't anticipate the ways in which these issues are so, important, impactful, deep. And so by taking bites out of this big, confusing issue and approaching it from all of these different angles, I think it's a great use of our time. And I think it's a great reason to check in with each other and to meet over the course of the coming weeks so that we can continue to kind of deconstruct something that is coming for all of us, that's going to happen to all of us. So I think that's great. And then finally, one of the things I want to acknowledge is that some of the people participating, they may be like my clients who are coming in for the first time, and after they've experienced so much in life, and we're starting the conversation. That's wonderful, right? You should feel comfortable asking questions that reflect the fact that you're at the beginning of this journey. Other people have already thought a lot about this. I like to tell people, I don't know to what degree Amy's going to agree with me about this one. Ron may not also, but when I'm working with clients sometimes and they start to get excessively focused on the details, I just say, like, hold on, this isn't a hobby, right? It's not a hobby, because my part at least, I'm focused on getting my clients from a starting point to a clear deliverable, right? And my deliverable with them most often is conversations, making decisions, identifying issues. But then my deliverable for them is we got to execute that document, right? So I'm constantly saying, like, hold on, this isn't that, don't dive too deep. I think actually after hearing from Amy and knowing how Ron approaches the topic, I feel like I'll edit that moving forward. And I think I'm just going to say, like, your hobby doesn't start until we're done executing documents or something like that. And so I love the people, I've participated in things like this before, and I love the participants who come up and they say, and I realize it's a hobby for them, right? And I realize they've thought a lot about this. They're on the 3rd iteration of their healthcare directive, right? All of these different things. And so if that's you, I'm glad you're participating. I look forward to what you're going to bring to our conversation as well.